If you could live anywhere in the world, why do you choose Omaha, Nebraska?
Yeah, I love it. And I was born about a mile from here, and I've never had a bad experience in Omaha. Omaha and Nebraska are home to me. Everything about it seems like home. It's a pace, it's relationships. There's a lot of continuity, there's a lot of community, there's a lot of friendship. It's a very solid place and friendly place in which to grow up and in which to conduct a business. When I came back to Omaha in early 1956, I had no idea what I was going to do. But a few months after I came back, some members of the family said, what should we do with our money? And I said, well, I'm not going back in the business of selling stocks, but if you would like to join me in a partnership, I said, I'll be glad to do it. So within a couple of months after coming back, I set up the first partnership. I wrote all the checks individually. I filed 11 income tax returns. I took delivery on stocks for all the different companies. I was a one-man band there for 6 years.
Warren would sit upstairs in his little office there, and I would bring up the name of a company, and most of the time, he knew much more than I did about the company. He'd know how many shares were outstanding, he'd know the capitalization, he'd know the earnings. It was absolutely incredible. I mean, when Warren said something, it meant a heck of a lot. And I think all of us paid a lot of attention to Warren when he took a definite stand on something.
When I first met Warren back in 1959, I recognized immediately that he was a very intelligent person.
For the last 4 or 5 years, the stock market has been booming along and presumably forecasting better business, which has really not materialized. So maybe the stock market is really correcting a previous incorrect forecast this time rather than making a new correct one.
He'd made a lot of money buying thinly traded securities that were incredibly cheap statistically.
Warren was at that time dealing with small companies, and his investments often were to buy a company that you could figure was a discarded cigar butt, but it had one more smoke in it. And he wanted to buy at the right time to be able to benefit from the one smoke.
The first partnership started with $105,100. I put up the 100 and the other people put up the 105,000. And then at the start of 1962, I moved to Kiewit Plaza. And by the time I moved to Kiewit Plaza, we had $7 million invested, and a fair amount was profits. I was then renting a house. I never owned a house to that point. And then 2 years later, I bought the house I live in today in 1958. We had 3 children, Susie and I. And we had them young, incidentally, which was, I think, a very good thing. My daughter, Susie, was born here. I named her Susie just like that as soon as I looked at her, because she looked just like her mother. And she was a cinch. And then Howie was, this absolute bundle of energy, which made things very difficult for Big Susie for a while. Peter again reverted back to Susie's personality, and he was an easy child.
Well, I would describe my childhood as normal, but who knows what normal is. People often think, well, Warren Buffett was this famous rich guy. He was not famous and he wasn't rich when we were growing up.
What I saw first and foremost, day in and day out, was consistency. Every day we'd hear the garage door close in the house, and then like clockwork, my dad would come in the door, I'm home, and we'd all eat dinner together, which I think surprises a lot of people.
My dad used to rock me to sleep at night and sing Over the Rainbow. So I have this insanely sentimental attachment to that song. I've always had a really close relationship with him.
I've got 3 very different kids, and they've got a common heart, which they got from their mother. She did most of the work by far of bringing up the children, which was probably a good thing. They have more of her qualities than mine, which I would recommend.
Well, my mom was the biggest part of my life growing up. Even though I got disciplined on a regular basis and she was usually the one doing it, she was still my best friend. She was somebody who would help anybody. I mean, whether she knew them or didn't know them or maybe even didn't agree with them, she would still help them.
She was incredibly empathetic, and she was interested in every person individually. She never cared about money or business at all.
I mean, he would go around saying, I'm going to be the richest man in the world. And I think, well, it's like somebody says I play music and I'm going to be Mozart. I don't know. How does anyone know? How does anyone know, you know? So that was okay. I don't really care about that.
I would say that Susie led Warren toward changing his political views. He grew up as a young Republican. His father was a Republican congressman. But Susie saw things in different ways. She was the catalyst.
When the children were growing up, I was very involved in civil rights. I was immersed in it, and I think that's what made Warren a Democrat. He would go with me to hear speakers.
I remember that speech that Martin Luther King gave. That was one of the most inspiring speeches I've ever heard.
I come to say to you this afternoon,
Took me right out of my seat. My wife was with me, and we both had the same experience.
It will not be long.
It was interesting. In that speech, he talked about truth forever on the scaffold, wrong forever on the throne, but that scaffold sways the future. Well, he was going to be dead in 6 months, but that scaffold did sway the future. My wife was more active than I was, but I was 100% with her mentally. I was just working a little more on my own investments. But it did make a difference what we were going to do with the money after we made it. I thought I would pile it up over the years, then she would unpile it in terms of running one very large foundation. And I was particularly good at compounding money, and therefore society would benefit by waiting. I was genetically blessed with a certain wiring that's very useful in a highly developed market system where there's lots of chips on the table, and I happen to be good at that game. Ted Williams wrote a book called The Science of Hitting, and in it he had a picture of himself at bat and the strike zone broken into, I think, 77 squares. And he said if he waited for the pitch that was really in his sweet spot, he would bat 400, and if he had to swing at something on the lower corner, he would probably bat 235. And in investing, I'm in a no-called strike business, which is the best business you can be in. I can look at 1,000 different companies, and I don't have to be right on every one of them or even 50 of them. So I can pick the ball I want to hit. And the trick in investing is just to sit there and watch pitch after pitch go by and wait for the one right in your sweet spot. And if people are yelling, swing you bum, ignore them. There's a temptation for people to act far too frequently in stocks simply because they're so liquid. Over the years, you develop a lot of filters. And I do know what I call my circle of competence. So I stay within that circle, and I don't worry about things that are outside that circle. Defining what your game is, where you're going to have an edge, is enormously important.